Up until last summer, I really didn't have much good to say about CBD extracted from hemp. I'm not a fan of CBD isolate or spiking cannabis products with it. CBD just doesn't work reliably for patients on its own. Each of the plant's cannabinoids, terpenoids, flavonoids, and lipids are vital components that humans require to achieve the healing that comes with the entourage effect. But last summer, something new occurred. It was the first season that plants were grown at a commercial scale that were legally hemp, but they had all the medical marijuana genetics. This is a monumental difference. Up until last summer, good folks were taking industrial hemp fiber plants and extracting CBD. The problem with CBD isolate, though, is that the science does not support its medical efficacy, and the only reason it exists is because of the artificial market for isolated CBD created due to federal prohibition of the medicinal whole plant. Quality whole plant medicine comes from whole medical cannabis plants, not from hemp fiber plants. While the two may share a Latin name, they are wildly different plants due to years of hybridization. The hemp plants just don't have the terpene profiles and other attributes found in medical cannabis. But CBD from hemp fiber plants is federally legal enough that it can be sold online. So people grow the fiber hemp plants, extract the CBD, and are selling it rapidly. Last summer, though, some farmers in the U.S. approached CBD plant genetics from the opposite direction, and instead of growing fiber plants, they turned off the allele that makes THC in medical cannabis plants and grew truly medical cannabis plants legally as hemp. These plants that normally would have been highly regulated and sold in cannabis stores were allowed to be grown in open fields unsecured because with the THC allele turned off, they tested below 0.3% THC, which makes them legally a hemp plant, even though these are really medical cannabis plants. The evolution of this hybrid plant moves us beyond the simple vocabulary of describing a plant as hemp or medical cannabis. There are now medical cannabis plants that are regulated as hemp without being the fiber-producing sort. While confusing for outsiders, this evolution will again remake the CBD market over the next 5 years. And for die-hard CBD enthusiasts like me, there's finally a scalable, low-cost method of providing CBD to patients everywhere. The next major milestone will be the inclusion of cultivars that have above 0.3% THC, but we're not quite yet there federally. If you want to learn about cannabis health, business, and technique efficiently and with good cheer, I encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter. We'll send you new podcast episodes as they come out, delivered right to your inbox, along with commentary on a couple of the most important news items from the week and videos too. Don't rely on social media to let you know when a new episode is published. Sign up for the updates and make sure you don't miss an episode. Also, we're giving away very cool prizes to folks who are signed up to receive the newsletter. There's nothing else you need to do to win except receive the newsletter. This month, I'm really stoked that we're giving away several newly released Air Vape X vaporizers from airvapeusa.com. Go to shapingfire.com to sign up for the newsletter and be entered into all future newsletter prize drawings. You are listening to Shaping Fire, and I'm your host, Shango Los. My guest today is Seth Crawford. Seth is a deinstitutionalized academic with a master's in public policy and a PhD in sociology. His focus has been on the political economy of cannabis. For years now, he has been consulted by lawmakers and policy specialists for better understanding of how the cannabis economy works. He's now co-founder of Oregon CBD, a company researching, developing, and wholesaling high CBD cannabis seeds. Today, we're going to talk about the dramatic evolution occurring in CBD genetics. Hey, welcome to the show, Seth.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming back. So let's start at the very beginning. You and your brother Eric saw this opportunity to produce CBD on the large scale because there were so many patients that were yearning for it. And yet to do it large scale, you had to figure out a way to make it legal to grow in volume where you lived in Oregon. So what did you and Eric see in this opportunity that decided to push you in this direction of producing CBD from plants that are legally hemp?
We have always really been looking forward to the day of being able to grow enough plants to do scientifically accurate selection. We're hobby breeders for a decade before we got into this full scale. And there's some really neat things that you can do as a hobby breeder, and people are doing this all over the world, and we love to see it But there are a lot of things that you just can't do with 4 plants or 6 plants that really emerges when you start growing thousands at a time to do your selections. That was one of the driving factors for us, was just being able to breed better plants.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you can do a sift that's that huge, you're going to jump ahead of hobbyists, like you were saying, who are only going to do their patient max of 4 or 15 or whatever it's going to be. One of the things I want to really drill on in this part, that's what sets you apart from a lot of the other hemp from CBD producers. Because I do talk a lot of trash about hemp-derived CBD on this show. But the weird thing is I always have to make this caveat, except for the stuff that comes from Oregon CBD seeds, right? Because you guys are going about this a different way than nearly everybody else in hemp. And if I understand it all correctly, so many of the hemp from CBD companies, they started with the fibrous version of hemp, and they are trying to breed in the medicinal qualities of, full cannabinoid content, medicinal terpenes, and, in order to be able to pull the entourage effect out of a fiber plant. I have not seen a lot of success in that. However, you guys came from the other direction. You guys actually started with a legit healing, full spectrum medical marijuana plant, and you decided to turn off the THC allele, which, as far as I'm understanding from outside of the CBD market, the CBD hemp market, that is a wholly new approach. So break that out a little bit for us, would you?
Yeah, that's accurate description of what's going on. Not only entourage effect for individuals who would be consuming the final product, but the other thing that you end up missing out from just a basic plant biology perspective, if you have no terpenes in your plant, you generally have more pests, you have more disease, you have more problems. Cannabis in the long term evolved many different terpene combinations that allow it to thrive in its natural environment. As the hand of humans has started to select for those different characteristics, we've obviously gravitated towards particular smells and particular effects that go along with those terpenes, whether it's for THC in combination with THC or CBD, or as we'll talk about pretty soon, CBG and other cannabinoids. So what we were really trying to do was to just recreate that, like you said, an entourage effect, but that beautiful palette that comes along with well-bred cannabis. In Oregon, we're lucky enough to be surrounded by literally decades of incredible breeding that has been done by a number of different individuals and put into the sort of the public well in terms of cannabis varieties that individuals have access to. And we once we had figured out how to essentially turn off the THC production, it allowed us to then go back to those wells and find those really interesting terpene combinations and breed them back in to create new lines. And that was basically the essence of our business to begin with.
So what can you tell us? I mean, I understand that there's a certain part of where your genetics come from that is proprietary, but I'm sure that there are people who are listening like me who would just love to hear what cultivar of medical cannabis you started with and what you did to it to turn off this THC allele. Because I'm sure that has raised flags for a lot of GMO-minded people in the audience. So for those of us who really care, can you break that out a little bit?
Yeah, there's really no secret. We didn't start with anything that was miraculous or strange. We started just like most other, I would say, small scale breeders, getting different varieties from Europe, mostly from Spain, and also natively sourced here in the United States. Most of the varieties, you can see sort of the history of the emergence of CBD. Many of the varieties were one-to-ones. So these are type 2 cannabis plants that have relatively equal parts THC and CBD. That was the starting block that we began with. And really what it comes down to with all real cannabis breeding, the answer to get to your solutions generally starts with inbreeding. We just do a lot of line breeding, inbreeding specific plants, selfing those, and when you self those plants, you start to lock in specific characteristics. And say with a 1-to-1 plant, if you were to self that, you're going to end up with 25% of the resulting progeny as high CBD plants. 25% of the resulting progeny will be high THC, and the other 50% are roughly 50% are still type 2s. So the initial process was not at the time. It may have seemed fairly revolutionary, but in reality, it's really not. And there are a number of other people who are doing that as well. Some of the later advances that we were able to achieve, like the flowering type 3 high CBD plants, and now type 4 CBG plants, that I think is that's definitely something that did set us apart. And it was mostly driven by agricultural necessity. We could create really good plants, identify them, clone them, and run those clones in fields, and you have really good outcomes. But to grow at a truly industrial scale, to make an affordable medicine for people that's actually effective, you really can't just grow clones. And that's when we started really working on producing viable F1 hybrid seeds using our very inbred lines and recombining those.
Was the goal always to create a feminized and autoflower seed, or is that something that you realized was going to be necessary as you started interacting with your agricultural clients and realizing, oh my God, we need to make this easier?
For us, it was out of necessity, just in terms of how we could maximize our own production. Eric and I have always seen autoflowering plants as having a very interesting niche if managed properly, and we've always been curious about whether or not that would end up leading to innovations in large scale agriculture. I think that it does, and I think what we're seeing right now is not just on the CBD side, but also on for THC. As long as you can get the right terpene combination in those flowers, autoflowers are fantastic for large scale production. If it's going into an oil, whether that's for consumption or for a vape pen or whatever else, a myriad products are on the market. Autos are incredibly useful. But it was mostly just trying to develop initially, and this is back in 2016. It seems like forever ago right now,
yeah,
but
totally.
In 2016 we were trying to give ourselves as many options as possible. If you're trying to grow early in the season, your best bet is probably an autoflowering plant. And if you're trying to grow, to maximize production, you want to have a plant that finishes early in the season, but is still photoperiod sensitive. So we developed our early lines to do that. And if you have a long enough growing season, you can, potentially have a third crop with autoflowers, since they tend to be a little bit more robust and resistant to freezing.
I think it's really interesting to consider because, feminized and autoflower seeds in the traditional heritage cannabis farmer world, they get a short shrift, right? Feminized and autoflowers are somehow seen as unnatural, and a lot of people have a lot of gripes with them. But when you talk to people about their particular gripes, it's because they got some seeds that had been bred into a feminized, and so now there's like Hermes in their stock, and it seems that the reasons why people don't like feminized and autoflower has little to do with the seed itself and everything to do with how people have used them incorrectly for their purpose. Whereas you're designing these seeds specifically for multi-acre grows in an agricultural setting where you're dealing with really high volume and every plant has to be the same and harvested, either at the same time or in known waves. And I think that's an important thing to point out, is that these are feminized and autoflower seeds for a reason that has never existed before.
That's exactly right. and they're almost two separate issues. I mean, the complaints about auto-flowering plants, especially for THC production, were legitimate. I grew auto-flowering THC plants 2006, 2007, shortly after they kind of emerged on the market, and they were terrible. I mean, you could see the promise with them, but the terpene profile was awful. It left you just feeling like you'd been hit by a train, and not in a good way. They were not sophisticated. They did not have good palates, but the performance was something that I just immediately latched onto and said, God, if you could make the flavor better and increase the overall resin content, this has potential. It took a decade to get back to that need before we started developing the newer versions of them. But in that interim time, in that 10 years, there was a sort of a revolution in good terpenes being added into those auto-flowering THC plants as well. So breeders have been working to improve those, and I think we're to the point today where you can end up with fairly high quality plants that come out of the auto-flowering world. With the feminized seed, your point is spot on. A lot of breeders, and you can't see me, so I'm doing air quotes at this point, but breeders who are more interested in just selling seed than necessarily creating good, stable lines. They're not as careful with weeding out those hermaphroditic traits. We're to the point with our breeding that we see one male, and they're not males. They're definitely female plants, but they're male. They have male phenotypes. So we've found 1 in 4,000 in our fields, and this is literally, we're talking about millions of plants that have been grown in Oregon and elsewhere over the last 2 years using our seed, and it's a very consistent rate. We get 1 in 4,000 that have a male phenotype. We've screened them using PCR, doing the genomics test from Medicinal Genomics, and they're female, even though they have male phenotypes. The really interesting background on that too is that if you use one of those phenotypic males to pollinate other female plants, you're going to end up with 50% that are phenotypically male and 50% that are phenotypically female. So it's a strange mutation that's going on, and I'm not really sure what's happening. I don't think anybody knows at this point, but an interesting feature for sure. But 1 in 4,000 versus having hermaphroditic traits built into your plants, we feel like that's a pretty good ratio. It's for us, that's one plant every 2 acres that you end up having to cut down.
See, that's actually epic. Will that phenotypically male yet somehow female plant be a risk to the rest of the crop? Can there be any pollination?
Oh yeah, it'll definitely pollinate, and we recommend to farmers that you basically walk your field. It's the old adage of the best fertilizers of farmers' footprints is definitely true in this case. You go out and you find those as soon as they start flowering. They're very easy to spot. They look just like a male, and we cut them down.
Even though that adds labor for the farmer, it kind of warms my heart, right? Because even though we are scaling up and industrializing several aspects of cannabis production, at least there's still something in it that the farmer has to be in the field and be around the plants and to give it that human touch, or at least awareness.
Very much so. And it really draws attention to the risk of pollen floating around in the environment in the first place. That one male plant, it's not going to pollinate your entire crop, and the chances of it, pollinating a neighbor are very slim. But you will end up with a 25 to 30 foot section of your field that is just completely seeded, and seeds, obviously scattered throughout wherever the wind was blowing. We had a fairly interesting, I say interesting now because it's been long enough that I'm not completely emotionally scarred from it anymore. Interesting situation back in 2016. We were trying to make feminized seed, doing a light deprivation run in the middle of the summer, and we had a neighboring farmer that had planted about 38 million male female hemp seeds, just broadcast seed. It was his first year growing, and it ended up it's a tremendous amount of males that were out in this field, and the pollen from that field destroyed farms 15 miles to the north, 15 miles to the south, 15 miles to the west, to the east. Everybody to the west was fine because that's the way that the wind was blowing. But that one just small scale experiment ended up in the first major year of production for Oregon recreational growers. It seeded a lot of crops. It destroyed. We lost 15 million seeds in that summer alone just due to contamination, and we had to destroy them. So pollen is a significant issue, and it's something that we have tried to be out on the forefront in terms of providing education to farmers to make sure that they know just what the risks are and to have good communication with their neighbors, but to also question the veracity of seed makers with the claims that they're making. It's the adage about cannabis seeds being a seedy business is very, very true.
Your unfortunate neighbor seeding the whole valley, and you mentioned, it points out the importance of communication. What did your valley do? Because your valley's full of hemp farmers now, from what I understand. What did you guys do to increase your communication so that kind of malarkey doesn't happen again?
Well, it's been an uphill battle, to be perfectly honest. Most farmers are responsible about it and try to communicate. The Department of Agriculture in Oregon makes available the list of farm sites and the acreage. So we know where all the other hemp farms are in the state, and we have email addresses and phone numbers and that sort of thing to be able to communicate with other farmers. That's the main thing that you have to do. But at the same time, there are some, especially older traditional farmers, who sort of thumb their nose and just say, look, I have a right to farm. And we've basically had to come back and say, well, we do too, and your right to farm is infringing on ours. And if you pollinate our crop with your grain crop that's worth $1 a pound, we're probably going to have to resort to legal action. And we don't want to do that. But the precedent needs to be set that people who pollinate others are responsible for that.
Yeah, right on. Hey, so I want you to change hats for a minute before we go to our first commercial. Up to this point, we've been talking a little bit about specifically, Oregon CBD Seeds, your company. But a lot of people know you as your, academic professor role where you testify in front of the legislature and are just, a general CBD expert, right? So I want you to put on that hat for a minute. So take off your CEO, co-founder hat and put on your professor hat and answer me this. How is what you are doing there and the seeds that you are providing to your partners in Oregon, how does that compare to what is going on in the other hemp hotspots in the country, for example, Colorado? Because, as I tell people about what you're doing in Oregon, which, when I toured your facility, it's mind blowing, right? What's going on there. If you've been taking care of patients for a long time and you think about it, you're like, oh my God, this is like the holy grail, low price, high terps, high CBD, not from fiber hemp. Oh my God. Right. But at the same time, there are people also excited about their breakthroughs in Colorado and other places, but they seem to be of a different tenor. So stepping away from the fact that you've got a company and into your academic shoes, how is what you are doing compared to what's happening elsewhere in the United States?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if we're going to go to the professor route, it kind of gets to the point of the work that I was doing before. My area of expertise was sort of social networks, long-term organization of capitalist societies. These sort of big picture, 500-year or 500-year views on the development of different social systems around different technologies, whether that's an agricultural technology or markets, that sort of thing. And I bring that to where we're at today with cannabis, because it's an absolutely exceptional time to be alive and witnessing what's going on with this particular market in good ways and in bad ways. We see the good, as you just described, incredible access for patients and people who didn't even call themselves and would never call themselves patients, or just people who are a little bit older who have aches and pains, and they can take this, what amounts to a nutritional supplement, and end up having a higher quality of life. I mean, it's destigmatized to the point where we're just constantly being approached by people who are using these compounds to just have a better time in their golden years. It's fantastic to see that. The negatives are, consolidation and lack of diversity and all of the things that you see happen in oligopolic markets, monopolistic markets. We're seeing that definitely emerge right now. But on the exciting side in these different states, Colorado, Kentucky, North Carolina now is coming online in a big way. I mean, we have 37 states that have industrial hemp laws passed, allowing some form of production. Right now, Oregon, Colorado, and Kentucky are definitely out in the forefront. And the folks who were early adopters, who had some capital behind them, have finally gotten their processing centers up and running to a point where they can actually handle the amount of material that is being produced, and not only handle it, but the demand is, as more CBD has entered the market, the demand has just increased exponentially along with that. So it's one of those situations where the more people know, the more they're exposed to it, the greater the demand, and it's worked out really well for everybody in this industry. Awesome innovations, both on the product side, on the extraction side, and the scalability. Just being able to put good marketing plans together on how to distribute this and get it, from point A to point B. Having a more robust regulatory environment where it's no longer. I think we're to the point now with hemp at the federal level that we know that it's not just going to go away. It's only going to continue to expand, and that's given a lot of the people in the industry a little bit more confidence that the direction that we're going is a good one, and it's okay to continue to invest your time and labor in this because it's really just going to go up.
So as far as seed providers go, I want to drill down very specifically to this potentially difficult question. So what makes Oregon CBD seeds great is the uniqueness of your seeds and the fact that you came from the medical cannabis side and then brought it under the umbrella of hemp by creative hybridization. Is anybody else in the country been successful doing that? I mean, do you have competitors that are putting out these same kinds of seeds that they have found their way to this same solution? Or are you guys the only folks in the country that are coming from the cannabis medicine side and not from the fiber hemp direction?
Oh no, there are definitely others who've been doing the same thing and who've been doing it just as long as us. Some good breeders in Colorado. We have good breeders in Oregon as well. The fun part is there's always somebody doing something unique. The thing that really sets us apart was the creation of the auto flowering plants, and in addition to that, are the development of our early flowering photoperiod sensitive varieties. So we are the only ones who are doing that at this point. And for us, that's the major technological innovation. In addition to having terpene-rich, very, very high content plants, that was the major innovation that has really pushed a lot of the farmers in Colorado and Kentucky, in addition to Oregon farmers, in our direction.
Are the three hotspots of Oregon, Colorado, and Kentucky, are you guys all allowed to buy seeds from each other, or do you have to buy seeds in state?
No, we are allowed to ship anywhere in the United States. It has a Section 7606 Farm Bill compliant industrial hemp research program. So we ship to Kentucky, we ship to Colorado, we ship Vermont, Maine, North Carolina, South Carolina. We have some clients in Florida that are coming online later this year. Anywhere there's a hemp program, we can ship.
All right, awesome. So now with this first set, I was talking about kind of where the seed technology is at the moment. I think let's wrap up this first set, 'cause I'm really excited about the second set because your season was insane, and it was very enjoyable for me to watch it from a state of way and watch you go crazy, and it'll be a good story. So stick around, folks. We're going to take a short break and be right back. You are listening to Shaping Fire. My guest today is Seth Crawford of Oregon CBD. We humans are attracted to plants because they offer us relief and are a whole lot of fun. Sometimes, though, the best parts are buried inside the plant, and we need to use specialty extraction technology. When it comes to cannabis, it is extraordinarily important to extract its precious oils without changing them in the process. We want to preserve the properties of the cannabinoids, terpenes, and other constituents that all work together. Since 1994, Eden Labs has been developing extraction technology and processes to do just that. Eden Labs was founded by a cannabis-loving engineer during the early days of medical marijuana in California, and the expanded Eden team has been designing and building industry-leading solutions for cannabis extraction ever since. Eden Labs' flagship product is the newly improved high-flow CO2 extractor. As other extraction companies enter the market, it is the high flow from Eden Labs that everyone chases and tries to compare themselves with. Not only that, but the improved automation software allows data to be collected, stored, and studied. Eden Labs can outfit your whole lab. Eden's Cold Finger ethanol extractor creates astonishing whole plant extracts working alone or in tandem with an initial stream distilling step to isolate monoterpenes before extracting the rest of the botanical constituents. Eden offers you many options, including vacuum distillation, column distilling, stirred reactor units, and accelerated solvent recovery. When you partner with Eden Labs, your lab team is enrolled into the Eden Labs training program to boost their understanding of Eden's best practices to ensure that your outputs are exactly what you require for your application, whether it be dab oil, oil for pen cartridges, or edibles. When you work with Eden, you're not just buying the tech, you are buying dedicated customer support to help you attain your business goals too. You can hear Eden's CEO, AC Braddock, talk about the company's values during Shaping Fire episode 19 that was all about CO2 extraction. So many of the new companies in the market just smell opportunity, slap an extractor together, and hire a marketing company. Eden Labs has been listening to feedback from extractors and consumers for about 25 years now. They care about both you and your consumer. Partner with Eden Labs to extract astonishing cannabis oils and terpenes that you will be proud of. Go to shapingfire.com/Eden to find out more. Join me at the upcoming CanMed event in Los Angeles for a gathering of the top minds in cannabis medicine. Field experts will present their latest findings and best practices in treating a variety of conditions with cannabis, including epilepsy, pain, traumatic brain injury, cancer, autism, and more. Laboratory professionals will share their revolutionary technologies in cannabinoid and terpenoid extraction, delivery methods, and quality and safety testing. CanMed 2018 is October 22nd through 24th at the Luskin Conference Center at UCLA. And while the final speakers list is still coming together, the speakers who are already announced give you plenty of reasons to get your ticket today. Prepare yourself to learn from 54 thought leader presentations focused on furthering the convergence of medical cannabis research, treatment, and product development. Speakers include the father of cannabis research, Raphael Meshulam. Michael Dor, chief medical consultant for the Israeli Ministry of Health, will be there too. The list of esteemed speakers participating is long and includes Shaping Fire guests, cannabis neuroscientist Dr. Ethan Russo, and Kevin McKiernan of Medicinal Genomics. You can view all the speakers at canmedevents.com. This year's CanMed features a special education track on the application of blockchain technology in the cannabis market, including cannabis banking, seed-to-sale tracking, sequencing the cannabis genome, ICO financing, and more. If you are a medical care provider, be sure to arrive a day early to participate in the pre-conference CME course. Find out more about that at canmedevents.com. That's CANNMED events.com. 95% of attendees said CanMed 2017 met or exceeded their expectations. That's a serious vote of confidence that CanMed 2018 will be well worth your time and resources. Shaping Fire listeners can save 20% off the ticket price by purchasing before June 21st and using the discount code SHANGO. So don't delay. Visit canmedevents.com today to reserve your seat and find out more. Welcome back. You are listening to Shaping Fire. I'm your host, Shango Los, and our guest this week is Seth Crawford. He's co-founder of Oregon CBD. So now that we've got you all set up at how you got to this summer there, Seth, let's talk about this craziness that was this summer. So people have an idea of the magnitude we're talking here. Describe the number of fields that you were running, and then also the associated fields, like, in your area that were using your seeds.
Yeah, that's what we had. 5 separate locations, various acreages. Our main research and development field was about 40,000 plants planted on around 35 acres. Total number of seeds that went out for the state of Oregon and to a couple other states, we were looking at about 2,000 acres worth last season. A substantial number of plants.
Yeah, substantial number. It's really enjoyable to walk through that much terpenes being given off too. And so you had your fields, and you provided your seed leadership to other folks in your valley. And we've already hit the story of the guy pollinating the valley a couple years ago. But what I'm kind of putting together is that your local area, you guys have kind of become the epicenter of hemp growing in Oregon, and there's some amount of partnership. You guys are kind of like an industry block of intention, right?
Yeah, I think that's an accurate description. Although I'd also throw in Southern Oregon as well. Southern Oregon has long been a large cannabis producing area, and a lot of the recreational farmers they started out last year doing smaller plots, but are moving in this year to bigger plots, and it's really becoming a force unto its own as well. But here in the valley, we're After the great pollination event of 2016, everybody sort of banded together to try to ensure that new farmers were educated and that the other farmers had access to not only feminized seed but good information. One of the major concerns that we've had is sort of unsavory characters making claims about seed that they sell. Last season, people were saying, this is mostly feminized, and farmers would plant it and it would be 50% female, which is not mostly feminized. And that happened on a regular basis. You had other seed sellers who were offering varieties that were actually type 2 plants, so equal parts CBD to THC, and it led to about 10% of the state failing their THC compliance tests. So everybody's trying to watch out, not only for their own interests, but the interests of the larger industrial hemp community at large. So it's turned into a nice sort of cooperative that everybody can contribute to.
It just occurred to me that the compliance tests to make sure that the amount of THC in the plants are so low, those happen at the end of the season. And because your plants are high CBD, no THC, your farms don't have the same kind of hardcore security around them that THC plants do. And it's funny and somehow ironic that there were all of these 1-to-1 plants that were being grown in fields just out next to people's houses, and they were fine and safe just because no one knew they had THC in them, even though those plants are like every high schooler's dream to go grab.
Yeah, exactly. And it's scary to be perfectly honest. It's sad for the farmers that ended up buying those seed. They were bilked by unscrupulous breeders. But I mean, what you're saying is completely true. The problem is that if you're over 1%, so if you're over 0.3% THC, you fail your compliance test. But if you're over 1%, you get turned into the local sheriffs, and that's a significant problem, especially if you have 10 to 20 acres of those plants. You're the numbers that you're talking about would lead to a life sentence in prison. I think Jeff Sessions was just talking about reinstituting the death penalty for people who are growing that many cannabis plants. So it's a laughing matter to a certain extent, because we can say, hey, people did this, and even though it was unscrupulous people who were misleading them, the world didn't end just because some THC was grown outside without a fence and security. That's the neat part. The downside is it's a legitimate risk, and there's a lot of problems that can come along with that.
Yeah, the think that you could pull a felony for what is absolutely a technicality in seed purchase, that is scary as hell.
Yeah, and the part that really got us is that we knew that this was going to happen. We knew where the seed source was coming from. We knew that there had been male THC plants that were outdoors in a neighboring field, and we knew that the seed crop had been contaminated. But because there was no seed certification program, there's no, you don't have to have any verification that the seed is actually type 3 industrial hemp. It's sort of a free-for-all, and it's allowed some grifters to enter the marketplace. They usually stick around for 1 year, and everybody figures out that they don't know what they're doing, and they'll try to get some quality seed. But in the meantime, lives are ruined, crops are lost, and it's a black eye for the entire industry.
Yeah, right on. So it's this next part of the interview that kept me so excited to have you back as soon as that you could find time for us again. And that is the evolution of your business model over the course of this last summer. So what I'd like you to do is to I understand that the major force of your business model was that you were going to make and sell feminized, auto-flowering, high CBD, nearly zero THC seeds. But as part of that, you need to have these research and development fields, and so that you can see how your plants are coming along and how they work in real agricultural environments. So at the end of the season, you were going to have, I think you said maybe 7 acres or something like that of plant material that was R&D, but now you've got all this flower. So I'm just kind of set you up to tell this story of what were your plans going to be for the flower at the beginning of the season, and how did that evolve over the course of the summer?
Yeah. Well, this valley, as we had experienced the year before, sometimes there's pollen floating around. So we had basically just planned on planting our field, getting our research crops in, running the risk of getting pollinated and having a seeded crop. And basically the only option that you have at that point is to turn it into oil and sell it to extractors. So that was essentially our plan going into the season. We just wanted to do our field trials to ensure that the varieties that we were offering to farmers for this season actually perform the way that we described. So we like to run our field trials the year before and then offer the seed once it's been progeny tested. We got to the end of the season, and we kept checking the flowers, and no, there's no pollen yet. Another week goes by. Well, there's no pollen yet. I'm not seeing any seeds forming. And we finally got basically about 2 weeks away from the initial harvest, and everything looked really good. There were no seeds in it, and at that point you're looking at 35 acres of unseeded, just beautiful terpene-rich flowers. It's as you got to experience, it's very hard to be able to accurately describe the excitement that one who's passionate about cannabis and terpenes will have walking through a field. There's
so much joy in that experience. Oh my God. Walking through and smelling all the terpenes as the sun is hitting the flowers and they're all calling out. Oh man.
It's otherworldly, and it puts a smile on my face to think about it. And every time we send a farmer out the door with seed, it's the one thing that we generally leave them with is just wait until August. When your field is in full bloom and you don't have to harvest just yet. It's a truly magical experience. It's transformational. It's very cool. But we got to that point in the season, and we had some folks come from Switzerland who really wanted to get our flowers because they came and they smelled them early in the season and went, wow, these are tremendous. But knowing that the risk of contamination, I didn't want to put us into a situation where we would get into a contract to supply trimmed flowers or something like that. That's what they wanted. And then end up with a seeded crop and not be able to follow through on it. But once we made it to that point in the season, we realized that, okay, we're going to trim and dry as many of these acres as we possibly can, and send them internationally to Switzerland. And,
all right, so let me hold you right there, because that's a big deal. Number one, how did the people in Switzerland find out about your little farm in Oregon?
That's a great question. I'm honestly not sure, but we're contacted pretty regularly. The European and Swiss hemp market for smokable flowers has really just taken off in the last couple years. Switzerland has a 1% THC rule, which gives you a little bit of flexibility in the oil content of the plant, and so they've been producing it in mostly in glass houses for the last 2 years, trying to meet the demand. And they saw Oregon as sort of a hotbed of production, and started reaching out to different farms throughout the state. And most of the farms that were growing good material were all actually growing our seed. So as they say, the roads all seem to lead back to us. And so they found us, and we got them some flowers.
So one of the things that I picture in my head is that as the summer goes, and as more people, hear your story, and they hear the first podcast that I did with you at the beginning of the season, and the hemp people just start talking about what you guys are doing, that you're starting to get more and more, VIP contact from the US and interested people from other countries. And I can feel like this brewing, this attention, and people making contact with you and yearning for your stuff. Is that how it was feeling for you as well? As you're like, oh my God, we're riding this bull of a product, and now everybody wants it?
Very much so. Very much so. And that was true both on, our flower material, and on the seed itself, because the flower material was, I think it was excellent. The products that are coming out of it were definitely things that I'm proud of, and I think everybody on our crew would say the same thing. But because it was an R&D field, we were basically doing the trials for what other farmers will be growing this season, and the buzz was definitely palpable. So it led to not only the high demand for the flower material, for the resulting trim, and all the other products that go along with that, but for the seed as well. Our our harvest season was long, arduous, as they always are for everybody, but it didn't stop. I mean, we went from our flower harvest and trimming and exporting to building out new facilities in 3 separate counties to make sure that we could meet the exploding seed demand.
And, I want to take a quick second here and mention, you've dropped out 3 or 4 times. It's been increasing as the interview has gone. So if you're listening and you're like, I keep on losing, like a second or two, it's because where Seth lives, way out, rurally in Oregon, they are experiencing a thunderstorm. And so, when the weather gets bad, they drop packets sometimes. So don't think that it's your phone or whatever. We're just occasionally dropping packets from Seth. So thanks for staying on the line there, Seth, even though the weather's getting crazy down there.
No problem. Yeah. Sorry for the drops.
Yeah. Well, So I want to finish up this great Switzerland story. So now that, the Swiss folks found you and they contacted you and they wanted to buy your flower, but you're like, I don't want to commit to the flower because we think it's going to get seeded over the summer. Now you're 2 weeks out from harvest and you've got all of this unseeded Sinsemilla high CBD flower. And you're like, oh my God, the value of this product just shot up, because it's got great value do in other countries. So how did that deal finish up? Because, I talked to you briefly during that time and you were like, oh my God, we got to hire all this new staff and trimming machines and we got to figure out how to package this and get it to Switzerland. So tell that part of the story, because I found it pretty engaging.
Oh, it was traumatic. I don't even want to revisit it. Yeah, I mean, it just a number of different growing pains and logistical details of, basically learning how to operate large-scale machine trimmers, hiring a very large crew of people to come in to do the finished trimming with that, packaging. I'd never shipped quantities that we were talking about. We ended up using FDA-approved 55-gallon drums with plastic liners. We could fit about 30 pounds without crushing the resulting product, about 30 pounds in each one of those, and you could fit 4 of those on a pallet and then shrink wrap them, and off they go. So it was just a nonstop deluge of trimming, packaging, wrapping, shipping, and going back into the field to then harvest more and more and more and dry, and basically maximizing our drying space and our throughput, and just there's no way that we could have done what we did without the crew that we had. Everybody was very devoted to the cause, and for a lot of people, it was sort of a mind-blowing experience. Everybody is used to, you think industrial hemp, and you definitely don't think of the flowers that we were pulling out of that field. So it was fun. It was definitely a good experience for everybody involved.
And this is one of the times that you're really glad that you're growing autoflowers too, so that you can stagger the harvest, because with regular photosensitive flowers, everything would have been ready just about the same time.
So this is the interesting part. We did have autoflowering plants, but the material that we were trimming they're photoperiod sensitive varieties, but they have been designed to flower very, very early. And the other characteristic that we've been able to put into these plants is that you can stagger the harvest with them. And you get about a 3-week window. The first batch was finished the first week of September. The second batch was done the second week of September. And then, we were basically harvesting until the rains hit after that with the later maturing varieties. But they're all within the same basic harvest window. And that's one of the innovations that we've been able to, we've been successful in breeding into the lines that we've developed.
So we're all familiar with seeing the kinds of machines that are used to harvest fibrous hemp. What kind of mechanizations can you use for harvesting, when you want to preserve the flower? Is this all done by hand and the only mechanized part is the trimmer?
That is correct. Yeah. Yeah. And it's what we tell clients is that there are a number of different options for your finished product. At the end of the season, you can flash dry it and the terpenes will all vaporize, and it's basically only useful for isolate. There is a market for that. Although it's a lower value. Then the next best option is something like a low temperature hop kiln that's operating anywhere between 80 to 90 degrees and just moving a tremendous amount of air, just getting that air movement to dry. Those products retain a lot of the heavier terpenes. You lose your monoterpenes, but you still end up with a nice synergistic potential medical product that would be turned into oil. The highest value is if you treat it just like a high-grade THC plant. You hang dry it, slowly cure it, and then, we went with the mechanical route on trimming, just because the cost of hand trimming would have been prohibitive and not physically possible, to be perfectly honest, with the quantity that we were dealing with. And
also probably not necessary, honestly. Hand trimming is certainly something that changes the bag appeal, but at this point, the audience that you were serving were cigarette smokers in Switzerland, which is certainly a different crew than West Coast cannabis connoisseurs.
Exactly. Yeah, it was. I've never been a big fan of machine trim, but it did a decent job.
I gotta ask, how did you get all these pallets? And if you can tell me, how many pallets of these 4 drums were there, and how did you get them to Switzerland?
Honestly, I don't even remember how many there were. That's a blur, but there were a lot that left our facility.
Like over 100 though, right?
Not that many.
Not that many. All right. I have no way to translate how 37 acres into pallets, right?
Well, maybe. Yeah, and different products as well. So with the pallets, we would basically we had a shipping company that would arrive and take the pallets directly to the Portland airport, and they would fly out to Zurich with a direct flight. The company that was purchasing it from us would take possession at the Portland terminal, so it was no longer ours. They were in legal possession of it. So off it went. That's one way of doing it. We also have these very large bags. They're used for grass seed, other seed crops, grains, called super sacks, and those can hold about anywhere between 250 to 300 pounds of trim material all at one time, and they're basically just a pallet's worth of material. That's kind of the industry standard in terms of shipping large quantities of material to processors domestically, but that's also now going international as well.
So this last question before we go to break, I hope that you don't deem it unfair, but I'm going to set it up properly, but it could be a hard question. And I know you to be a very patient-centric dude. Both you and your brother have got big hearts. You work with patients. You give advice to people for CBD. You like them to have strong endocannabinoid systems, and you are very invested in your local cannabis scene. So you're the kind of people that we want to see succeed. And when I visited the farm, I had all these visions of low priced cannabis getting into the hands of patients, and I was excited for that. And yet somehow I was also excited for you that you got this amazing buyer in Switzerland, and that was cool. But all this CBD was now leaving the United States, and you had to have been torn about that. And I'd love to hear about your decision.
Yeah, very, very much so. The largest influencer of that was the fact that, we have this Oregon market that we could have sold directly into had it not been prohibited by state law. At the time, you could not sell cannabinoids or flower product into the adult use market if it was derived from industrial hemp. And that was just this strange quirk in the Department of Justice in the state of Oregon in their interpretation of the existing law. It took us a whole year to get that change. Our lobbying group for industrial hemp farmers just got that passed in the last legislative session in March. So we hope to be able to sell products, not just CBD, but also CBG and other novel cannabinoids as we're able to isolate them into the Oregon market first.
Excellent.
But yeah, it's
go ahead.
Very bittersweet.
Yeah, totally. Both sides of that to see all the potential and then realize that it wasn't actually going to make it into local patients. Yeah, bittersweet. Well said. All right, let's go ahead and take our second short break. You are listening to Shaping Fire, and my guest this week is Seth Crawford of Oregon CBD. Using pesticides when growing cannabis has been common for a long time. Nowadays, though, we know better. We know that most pesticides formulated for food crops have never been tested for use with cannabis. They've been tested to be eaten in tiny doses. They have not been tested to be inhaled, and especially not concentrated into a cannabis oil. Chemical residues from pesticides are not healthy for anyone, but they are especially dangerous for patients. For commercial cannabis growers, this has become very impactful. Cannabis enthusiasts and patients have gotten educated enough that they avoid growers who used pesticides. Not only that, but states across the country have begun making pesticide testing mandatory on all licensed cannabis crops. The time has come to find a better way to fight garden pests than covering your cannabis in chemicals. And there is a better way. Let some good bugs fight your bad bugs. Beneficial insects and predatory mites have come a long way since we were buying ladybugs online and putting them in the grow room and just hoping for the best. Natural Enemies Biocontrol can help you solve pest issues without using chemicals. Natural Enemies founder Shane Young learned best practices from working in the ornamental plant industry and has fine-tuned those strategies specifically for large cannabis crops. Shane works with commercial cannabis clients across the country to ensure that they keep their crops safe and pest-free without the use of chemicals. Natural Enemies has proven solutions for spider mites, aphids, thrips, russet mites, broad mites, shore flies, whitefly, and others too. You can rely on Natural Enemies for expertise and excellent service. For more information, go to shapingfire.com/Natural Enemies or simply click on their banner in this week's newsletter. If you own a cannabis company, you know that finding good business partners, vendors, and allies is an essential part of your role. And building your business in a new industry like cannabis doesn't always make that easy. CannaCon is coming to Boston and Detroit this summer, and the halls will be filled with every kind of ally you need for a cannabis company. Technology, horticulture, packaging, marketing, legal, human resources, and media, everything you need for your business will be there. And your customers will be there too. Because CannaCon is a premier cannabis business and networking event with nationally recognized speakers and the opportunity to have serious conversations with your business peers and investors. Reserving yourself a booth at CannaCon can unlock a lot of doors for you. Not only do you get to network with all the people who pass your booth, but it is not uncommon for CannaCon vendors to do $1 million in business during the event. CannaCon's Seattle event in February sold out well in advance, so reserve your booths now for Detroit, June 1st and 2nd, and Boston, July 27th and 28th. Attendee tickets are still available for both events. Whether you reserve a booth or attend just for a day, do not miss the opportunity to become a serious player in your market. Visit cannacon.org for tickets, booth reservations, and more information. That's cannacon.org. Welcome back. You are listening to Shaping Fire. I'm your host, Shango Los, and our guest this week is Seth Crawford, co-founder of Oregon CBD. So in this last section, we're going to talk a little bit about legality and a lot about the future of CBD-derived hemp. But first of all, I want to hit on the Reggie Gaudino interview that we had last week, all about intellectual property and cultivars, because I know that it excited you and engaged you in a lot of very important ways. And so I want to give you the floor so that you can kind of speak to the topic last week of protecting these important cultivars that you are developing.
Yeah, it was an excellent interview. I'd really appreciate you just making the time and Reggie for making the time to have that conversation. I think it's an incredibly important moment in time for the entire cannabis industry, having moved from, a system where each individual breeder was doing their own thing and generally in small ways, but others doing it in larger ways. Having a new legal environment in place has, I think, changed the calculations for a lot of people. One of the things that we have done is basically what Reggie was advocating for, and that is to preemptively file patents to protect the breeding technology, the breeding approach that we use to create a lot of our varieties. At the end of the day, whether or not the U.S. Patent Office will grant that is, obviously something that we're gonna do our best to make that happen. The way that we end up using it, however, is a lot of people are concerned about individuals or corporations holding these patents and then excluding wide swaths of certain types of plants or chemotypes or terpene profiles from the general public. That's something that we're very concerned with as well. It's obviously not something that we would be doing, but it raises this really complicated issue for people who are investing a significant amount of time and energy and money into the development of unique cultivars or chemotypes, or even just potential breeding strategies like we're doing. There needs to be some sort of way to stop those bigger companies. The one that's always raised is Monsanto, and soon to be called Monsanto Bayer or Bayer Monsanto or whatever. Totally. But $2.5 billion in research every single year is a substantial amount, and that's not something that we can compete with. So I think a lot of the folks that are sort of out in front on this are are preemptively trying to protect the work that they're doing, and there are others who are trying to make sure that all of the previous work is accounted for. It's out in the public domain. Interesting times to say the least, but it's something that I think that a lot, as Reggie highlighted, I think cultivators and breeders would be very wise to look into the potential for doing stuff like that.
Yeah, and competing with their $2.6 billion R&D budget is only the half of it, right? Because their legal budget is insane as well, and they may be able to develop the same things as smaller cultivators are working on with that kind of R&D budget, but also trying to defend your chemovars or cultivars or techniques against somebody like Bayer Monsanto that's its own problem that doesn't even take place in the field. That happens in the courtroom and in briefs and is just as ugly. Let's talk for a second about one of your most valuable strains. I mean, your whole line is unique for their own reasons, but I know that you are excited, as well as a lot of patients I know are excited about your CBG strain. So why don't you talk a little bit about that and your hopes of protecting that so that you can share it?
Yeah, first of all, CBG is phenomenal. It's incredible in terms of its pain relief, muscle spasms, spasticity. As a topical, it's great for eczema and psoriasis. It's one of those compounds that, once you've tried it, it's kind of mind bending to say the least, that it's just been tucked away for so long inside of the cannabis genome and is now just popping up. So we're really excited to be able to bring that to the table for farmers in 2019. At this point, it's not just one variety. I think we're at, I think there's between 7 and 9 individual lines that we're working on that have very different approaches and different practical applications, whether it's for the production of, field production with harvests using combines, or terpene-rich varieties that will be hand harvested in the same way that a lot of the finest flowers are still grown for THC production. A number of different options, different flavors, and different characteristics. We have some that are 100 to 1 CBG to THC. We have other varieties that we've now developed that are over 300 to 1 CBG to THC, which means that you can do an oil extraction, a basic rough oil extraction, and still be below the 0.3% THC limitation at the federal level. Definitely some game-changing things that are coming out and will be available to farmers for 2019. And
CBG, since people don't spend a lot of time using it on its own, it doesn't have as much of a rep as other parts of the plant, and certainly when you come across CBG, it's not going to be in a whole plant, right? Most of the time, it's because it's extracted out. But the proof was in the pudding when we visited your farm and we tried a dab of your CBG rich strain and we left your sampling booth. I thought at first I didn't think I felt anything, and then I realized I was in a really good mood and kind of felt like I was walking on clouds. But my associate I brought with me, he's got lifelong pain, and on that particular day, his leg was all flared up, and he was uncomfortable in my car, and it was a drag. And we got back out to my car, and we're driving away, and he nudges me, and he's like, "Dude, I don't hurt and my leg's fine." And I'm like, "Oh, that's nice." He's like, "No, you don't understand." And so that's when we first started talking about how, we talk about CBD being 20 to 1 all the time and how nice it is to be able to get cannabidiol into folks with a low amount, just trace amounts of THC, especially kids who don't want to be lethargic at school, through their parents, of course. But with the CBG, 100 to 1 CBG, and that is a powerful pain reliever. This opens up a whole new field of cannabis clinical medicine. Not that they're going to be giving them
very
dabs,
so.
though.
I mean, to be perfectly blunt, I think that America would be a better place. I think every place in the world would be better off if every adult had a CBG pen, a vape pen in their pocket. Like you described, it's not psychoactive, but it's also, I describe it as being a profound experience in the sense that it provides a significant amount of mental clarity. If you are anxious, or if you've had too much caffeine, or you're tense, it is a non-psychoactive relaxer. I mean, it calms people down, in addition to having all of those different pain relieving properties. I don't want to, you don't never want to be making proclamations that are a little bit of a reach, but I do think that for a lot of people who suffer from chronic pain, this is one of those amazing substances that will help them not take opiates. And the more cannabinoids that we have at our disposal to be able to deal with things like opiates, the better off we're all going to be. But we are really looking forward to seeing thousands of acres of this in production in the coming years.
And so if you've got seed for these strains coming out next year, I take it that you are following Reggie Gaudino's strategy and defensively patenting it in advance.
Yeah, we are. The reason that we're not releasing it to farmers, though, is for the same reason that the varieties that you saw in the field last year are the test crop for what farmers are growing this season. We do field trials to make sure that we're doing accurate progeny testing so that we can make the best seed possible for farmers. I don't know of any other companies that do that outside of general agriculture and seed production for other crops. We've basically just tried to mirror that. We've taken our success and built a genomics lab. We're doing in-house testing. We do these large-scale field trials to make sure that the product that goes out is going to perform exactly the way that we say it is, because we A, know it really well, and B, are telling the truth based on legitimate field applications of the product. So that's the goal this season. This summer is we're growing out all of these different new creations and finding out which ones work and which ones don't from a farming perspective.
Right on, yeah, because a lot of these seeds, there's a big difference between growing 25 plants in your yard versus growing 25 acres. Agriculture is a whole different animal. And to that point, you need a lot of seeds to be able to grow that many plants. And from what I saw when you had your announcements of seed sales this year, you had way more people interested than you had seeds. People were showing up to your seed sale days and essentially, buying out your whole run on that day. And then, I've been watching your posts about your new, your seed manufacturing structures. So can you just give me a little bit idea of how much you've chosen to scale up and if you think that you're going to meet demand this year?
I think we'll be able to meet. Well, that's probably a stretch. I think we're going to be able to meet the demand for this season. But the crazy part is that people come out of the woodwork between now and May 1st, and large orders are definitely happening. We went from being able to produce basically about 5 million seeds per year to being able to produce 50 million per year. And this summer we're going to be scaling out. We have 500 lights between our three main production facilities. We're scaling that up to 2,000 lights so that we can produce every year we'll be able to produce about 100 million seeds. So we're doing everything that we can to make sure that this is a viable large-scale agricultural crop for as many farmers as we can possibly get into the farming.
It's weird too, because that's just producing those seeds is like running an entirely separate company. I mean, you're selling seeds, you've got all these seeds in your R&D fields, you're machine trimming it and sending it to Switzerland. And oh yeah, we've got these, 4 or 5 locations with 200 lights producing like this epic volume of seeds. That in and of itself sounds like a hassle. You do it all indoors, right? So as you were complaining about your neighbor that pollinated the whole valley, you instead are doing it in very tightly controlled areas with, vacuums that pull inside and everything, right? So that it's a very sealed up manufacturing process.
Exactly. The nice part about what we're doing is, growing inside is the only way to really ensure that that you're going to have a quality product that's not contaminated. And we've talked about this before, but one legitimate male, one pollen grain from a male plant would destroy a crop, and we would have to basically get rid of all of those seeds. And we do that. Quality is of the utmost concern for us. If a farmer ends up with one plant in their entire field that is sampled by the Department of Agriculture that has, if it's a type 2 plant, if it's a 1-to-1, that one plant would make them fail their compliance test. So we do everything in our power to make the production side sealed, clean, and not worrying about pollen contamination. We also flower in the winter. That's when we're making all of our seeds, so that we can miss the large potential plumes of outdoor pollen just in case it's going on during the regular harvest season. But even after all of that, we still grow out these test batches and do our PCR screen to make sure that there are no Y chromosomes in our gene pool. So when farmers are getting seed from us, they can reasonably assume that they're going to perform as we've claimed, and we're trying to back that up with basically 21st century science being brought to bear on this ancient, awesome agricultural crop that we've all been growing for generations.
Woohoo! So what do you see as being, looking forward to this summer? What do you see as being some of the interesting hot points? Like, last summer you were super shocked in a good way because you didn't get pollinated with somebody else's seeds, and therefore instead of having CBD rich flower for extraction, you actually had CBD flower that was sensimilla without seeds. And so it was much more valuable than you had planned. But it created a kink in your business model. What do you see as being potential changes that could happen either for your business model or for the industry in general this coming summer?
To be determined. I've given up on forecasting. It changes so dramatically and so radically every season. I know that for us and for our company, we've gone through tremendous growth in the last year, and we are trying to devote ourselves fully to the process of creating seed and doing good field trials. And I don't think that we're going to be doing trim flower again this season. It was an awesome one-off last year, and it worked out. But for us to be able to focus on the breeding, and not just CBG, but all of the other minor cannabinoids that are basically coming online, as better testing is emerging. That's really where our focus is, and being able to create varieties that will succeed and thrive in other areas. We're doing a lot of custom breeding projects right now for, say, tropical areas, totally different environments that we're not accustomed to, and we don't necessarily have access to in the summer for us to grow here. So we've had to build out climate controlled environments to replicate those low, very high levels of humidity, very warm, basically trying to do controlled experiments to develop varieties that will work in other areas as well.
Right on. Well, that's all really inspiring, and all of us, from patients to product manufacturers to entrepreneurs to retailers, we are all looking for your success so that you can bring a wider array of cannabis products to the market. So keep on the good fight, brother.
Oh, thank you so much.
Right on. Well, thank you for being on the show, Seth, and send our best to your brother Eric too, who, even though he wasn't with us today, is a big part of why Oregon CB Seeds is a success. And we look forward to talking to you again at the end of the season to find out what unexpected realities came across your plate this year.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
You can reach Seth Crawford via his website at OregonCBDseeds.com. And even if you don't necessarily want to reach out to talk to Seth, I recommend you go to the website just to enjoy the reading of their catalog of seeds. If you're a nerd for this kind of thing, just reading the product descriptions will cause you a lot of joy. And also it's fun to follow their Instagram at OregonCBD. You can find more episodes of the Shaping Fire podcast and subscribe to the show at shapingfire.com and on Apple iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. If you enjoyed the show, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a positive review of the podcast wherever you download. Your review will help others find the show so they can enjoy it too. On the Shaping Fire website, you can also subscribe to the weekly newsletter for insights into the latest cannabis news and product reviews. On the Shaping Fire website, you will also find transcripts of today's podcast as well. For information on me and where I will be speaking, you can check out shangolos.com. Does your company want to reach our national audience of cannabis enthusiasts? Email hotspot@shapingfire.com to find out how. Thanks for listening to Shaping Fire. I've been your host, Shango Los.